The gym smelled of sweat and ambition. It was a small martial arts dojo in a quiet town, where every evening students gathered to train, spar, and polish their craft. Among them was Kyle, a young man in his late 20s who had recently earned his black belt in karate. He was proud, too proud. Perhaps his confidence often spilled into arrogance, and he liked to display his superiority over those he considered beneath him. One evening, as practice wound down, the janitor walked in. His name was Mr. Jameson, a tall, quiet black man in his 50s who had worked at the community center for years. Most students barely noticed him. To them, he was simply the man who swept the mats, emptied trash bins, and polished mirrors long after they had left. Kyle, sweaty from sparring, leaned against the wall and smirked as Jameson began mopping the far corner of the dojo. The older man moved slowly, his shoulders heavy with the kind of fatigue that comes from years of hard labor and unspoken burdens. "Hey, Jameson," Kyle called out loudly, making sure everyone heard. "You ever try this stuff? You know karate?" The janitor paused, then offered a small, polite smile. "No, son. My job is just to keep this place clean." But Kyle wasn't satisfied. He wanted attention, amusement. "Come on," he said, stepping forward with his black belt tied tightly around his waist. "Let's spar. For fun. I'll go easy on you." The room filled with awkward laughter. Some students chuckled nervously. Others looked away, uncomfortable with the spectacle. They knew Kyle was mocking the janitor, treating him as a prop for his ego. Mr. Jameson lowered his eyes. He wanted to decline, but something in Kyle's voice, the arrogance, the dismissal, stirred an old ache inside him. A lifetime of being underestimated, of being overlooked, of being spoken to as though he were invisible. "All right," Jameson said quietly. "If you insist." The dojo fell silent. Kyle grinned and motioned for him to step onto the mat. What no one in that room knew, what even the head instructor had never asked, was that decades earlier, Jameson had been more than just a janitor. In his youth, back in the turbulent 1970s, he had been a rising star in martial arts, a student of Shotokan karate. He had trained under a Japanese master who saw potential in him, when others did not. He had competed, traveled, and even won medals. But life had not been kind. Coming from a poor family, he had dropped out of competition to work and support his younger siblings. Then, when tragedy struck his mother passing away, suddenly he gave up martial arts entirely to take whatever job he could find. Cleaning floors paid bills, and over the years, the gleam of trophies was replaced by the dull shine of a mop bucket. Still, though his body aged, his discipline never left him. Every morning before dawn, in the quiet of his small apartment, Jameson still practiced kata. The art lived within him like an ember, hidden but not extinguished. On the mat, Kyle strutted like a showman. "Don't worry, I won't hurt you," he said, his voice dripping with condescension. Jameson only bowed respectfully, the way he had been taught decades ago. "OS," he murmured. Some of the students exchanged uneasy glances. There was something in the janitor's precise, practiced, almost sacred, that didn't feel like the gesture of a novice. The match began. Kyle bounced lightly on his feet, circling. He threw a playful jab, expecting Jameson to stumble back. Instead, the older man slipped out of the way with graceful ease, his movement effortless. A murmur ran through the room. Kyle frowned and attacked again, this time with a roundhouse kick. But Jameson's body flowed like water, stepping just enough to evade, countering with a subtle palm strike that landed softly against Kyle's chest. Not forceful, not aggressive, just enough to make him stagger back in shock. The dojo erupted with gasps. Kyle's face burned red. "Lucky shot," he muttered. Then he came at Jameson with full force, punching and kicking with speed that intimidated most opponents. But the janitor wasn't most opponents. He moved with the patience of someone who had spent years mastering the rhythm of combat. Every strike Kyle threw, Jameson redirected or slipped past, until the younger man was panting with frustration. Finally, in one smooth motion, Jameson sidestepped, swept Kyle's leg, and in a blink had him pinned on the mat. His hand hovered just above Kyle's throat, Nevatisgun just showing that if he wished, the fight could end right there. The dojo was dead silent. Then Jameson stood, offering his hand to help Kyle up. His voice was calm, steady, without a trace of arrogance. Martial arts isn't about showing off, aside softly. It's about respect for yourself and for others. Kyle, humiliated and breathing hard, could not meet his eyes. He brushed past and stormed out of the dojo. The students stood frozen, digesting what they had just witnessed. For years, they had overlooked the man who cleaned their mats. They had never once thought to ask about his life, his story, his skills. The head instructor, an elderly sensei, walked slowly toward Jameson. He bowed deeply. "Forgive us," the sensei said, his voice trembling. "We failed to see you, failed to honor you." Jameson shook his head gently. "There is nothing to forgive. Sometimes, people only see what they want to see." But word spread quickly. From that night forward, the students treated Jameson with new reverence. They greeted him with bows, offered to help him with tasks, and asked him about his training. Slowly, he began to share, not much just small lessons about humility, patience, and discipline. But those small lessons changed the dojo forever. Kaya, meanwhile, didn't return for weeks. When he finally did, he was different. Humblet, he approached Jameson quietly, his eyes lowered. "I'm sorry," he said. "I disrespected you, and I disrespected what martial arts really means." Jameson studied him for a long moment, then placed a hand on his shoulder. "The greatest victory," he said, "isn't defeating others, it's defeating your own pride." Though Jameson had earned the students' respect, his life outside the dojo remained hard. He still worked long hours for little pay. He still lived alone, in a modest apartment filled with fading photographs of family long gone. Sometimes, late at night, when no one was around, he would sit in the empty dojo after cleaning and practice a kata, moving with the grace of a man who had once dreamed of being a champion. His reflection in the mirror showed both strength and sorrow, the strength of someone who had carried heavy burdens, and the sorrow of dreams that had slipped away. Yet, in those quiet moments, he also felt peace, because even though the world had overlooked him, the art had never abandoned him. It was still there, breathing through him, reminding him of who he was. And now, at least, a few young students knew too. They had seen him not just the janitor, but the martial artist, the teacher, the man.